Namaskar viewers, hello and welcome to Sansad TV. I am Tina Jha, you're watching Perspective. A parliamentary panel has recommended setting up a dedicated cultural heritage squad for the recovery of stolen antiquities. The department-related Parliamentary Standing Committee on Transport, Tourism and Culture has said in a report tabled in both Houses of Parliament on Monday. Now, in its 348th report on the subject, heritage theft, the illegal trade in Indian antiquities, and the challenges of retrieving and safeguarding our tangible cultural heritage, the committee suggested that the government could set up a multi-departmental task force to speed up the retrieval process. The task force, as recommended by the panel, should include senior officials from the Ministry of Home Affairs for Police and Investigation, Ministry of External Affairs for coordination with foreign governments, the Archaeological Survey of India, along with senior scholars and experts. So how will a dedicated cultural heritage squad prove to be beneficial in recovery of stolen antiquities? Also, in what aspects will the team have to be trained for a quick and smooth retrieval process? Also, what kind of efforts are being undertaken or may be required to create a master database of antiquities in the country? We will analyze all these aspects and much more in this edition of Perspective. And for this, joining me are two distinguished guests. With me in the studio is Mr. Sanjay Kumar Manjul, Joint Director General, Archaeological Survey of India. Thank you, sir, for joining us on the program. And joining us virtually is Dr. Sonal Man Singh, Member of Parliament Rajya Sabha, a recipient of Padma Vibhushan and a cultural philosopher. Dr. Man Singh is a member of the department-related Parliamentary Standing Committee on Transport, Tourism and Culture. Dr. Man Singh, delighted to have you with us on this edition of Perspective. Mr. Manjul, let me begin the program today with you. And to begin with, your thoughts on the recommendation, the key recommendation that the parliamentary panel has made, that India should have a dedicated cultural heritage squad. How is this going to be beneficial for the ASI in retrieving our stolen antiquities?
Actually, it's really to safeguard our antiquities and also retrieval from abroad, the illicit antiquities which has been transported abroad. It's really a big task. So these recommendations is really important to strengthen the provision of brought back our heritage to India. Yes, in the Act in 1972, Indian Antiquity and Art Treasure Act having a lot of provision to regulate our national heritage or heritage of India's, particularly the movable antiquities in India and also art treasure. But these organizational or multi-channels includes for strengthen these the entire process that will really very good for our heritage, brought back to our heritage. Yes, at present also the Ministry of Culture, ASI is coordinating with CBI, DRI and police, the other custom, and these all the channels are already included in the entire process for retrieving of antiquities. But the dedicated team is really a good recommendation to have this strengthen this entire provision.
Sure. How can we strengthen it further? That the coordination that you spoke about is something that the panel has recommended, about which we'll discuss in detail. Let me go across to Dr. Sonal Man Singh, understand from her. She's a member of the parliamentary panel that has made the recommendation. Dr. Man Singh, help us and our viewers understand what really made the parliamentary panel suggest the idea of a dedicated cultural heritage squad, especially at a time when India has been working and making a lot of efforts in bringing back its artifacts.
I think the first motive is to speed up the whole process. 75 years down, independence of India, much before that and after that also, theft has continued. So number one thing is to speed up. Number two, I will draw your attention to the word squad. Usually it is used for a police force. Here, I think the whole idea is also to make it stronger, to make it pointed, bring them together, create a team with one pointed purpose, focused on retrieval of our cultural heritage, which is priceless, timeless, fearless. Third thing is, of course, there was a team already existing from various departments, from customs to finance to home to whatever, foreign affairs, external affairs. But now the determined effort is reflected in our recommendation that we have to be more focused, more determined. And this team, this squad, will have this one purpose only, so that their energies and time are not squandered on other things. Another thing that I find is that already by the great efforts and diplomatic relationships, which have been strengthened further by the tireless efforts of our great Prime Minister, Shri Narendra Modi ji, as never before, the number of retrieval has increased, I think, at least tenfold.
Right.
Yet, there is so much scope. And here I would like to mention one more thing, that if the squad is only outward looking, I wanted to suggest, which I will do so again in another amendment, to create a squad which is inward looking, which does not allow or permit theft of our artifacts, because it is, after all, the way they are stolen, the way they are transported abroad.
Right.
That is the key, the loophole, which we need to also plug. So one is retrieval, the quickest way, the surest way, a diplomatic way. Another thing is to try and see that the thefts do not happen on the scale they are happening now. Even now they're happening, but I think they're slowly, the thieves are beginning to understand that with this government, it's not going to be an easy task at all. So it works both ways. But I'm very, very glad about our recommendation. I hope it's taken up very, very seriously, very, very fast, and they're set to work in no time at all.
You're right. And with the kind of efforts, Mr. Manjul, that we've seen this government has undertaken since 2014, the numbers say, and in fact, the Prime Minister himself spoke about this at the International Museum Expo in May this year, that about 240 ancient artifacts have been brought back to India in just the last 9 years, in contrast to less than 20 for several decades after independence. The question here is, what has changed since 2014, that the kind of initiative that this government has undertaken to actually bring back what belonged to us, our cultural heritage. And it's an important message about how connected we should be, or what we are teaching to the younger generation about how rich we have been historically.
Actually, India has a very, very rich cultural heritage. And there is a lot of cultural material abroad before independence and after independence also. According to our Act in 1972, we are claiming all those objects which are gone after independence, in fact. And before independence, it's very, very difficult to claim that object. That is only about the political channel and the will of the countries. But yes, there is a lot of challenges in that to retrieve those objects. For that, as the recommendation came for dedicated team for the identification of our object in abroad, and also brought back to India, it's a really helpful for further. In 2014, there is a lot of change. You can see before 2014, only 13 objects brought back to India. And after that, yes, more than 138 object has already been retrieved from abroad. This is happened because the personal interest and initiative by our Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Yes, because of that, there is several country offering himself to give antiquity of Indian origin. USA, we have came lot of antiquities from USA, UK, Canada. Canada, you know that famous artifact from Varanasi, Annapurna, they offered himself.
More than 157
yes,
the Prime Minister brought back from the US after his recent visit.
So that's a great initiative. At present also 105 antiquities that is in the pipeline from USA. We may get very soon.
On the outward looking approach, as Dr. Man Singh suggested, we've been extremely successful since 2014. But as you also rightly suggested, Dr. Man Singh, that we need to now focus on inward looking approach. We need to strengthen ways in which we can combat theft, illicit trade, trafficking of our cultural objects. Does the panel, parliamentary panel, also suggest ways in which we can strengthen these efforts and perhaps a more proactive approach towards the inward-looking challenges that we face?
Yes, I think it's about time that this is introduced in our new education policy also, because the young people who travel so much, if they are culturally aware and proud about their heritage, then they can go on looking for these things also.
Right.
As suppose they are going to Himachal Pradesh, not just going to Shimla, but to other places. There are so many temples. There are so many other places of heritage importance. It's very easy to mix with the local people to find out the history, and very often the local people themselves provide information that ye yahan hota tha, ab nahi hai, pata nahi kahan gaya, kaun le gaya. And they can collect this information and provide it to the government. Another thing that I've always insisted upon is the community. Our community consciousness, which used to be there, is somehow getting eroded. The feeling कि ये हमारा मंदिर या हमारा ये heritage place है, चाहे किसी धर्म का हो, लेकिन ज़्यादातर देखा गया है that it is from the temples, the Hindu temples and the private places that artifacts have been stolen, are still being stolen. The community has to get up. The community has to report it. The community has to insist. And I think somehow, like somebody told me that even the living heritage, see, one thing is the heritage of our beautiful artifacts, which lie in museums all around the world, even in private museums and in private collections.
Right.
So identification and diplomatic discussion and persuasion, and then retrieval. These are the kind of steps. I'm now talking about the local awareness that among ourselves, we can do so much. People go to look at museums. I'll tell you, so many of our Indian friends, rich people, they go to Christie's and Sotheby's and they attend auctions. And they are the ones who should be reporting that this is what we saw there. And please find out, how did they get there? Kisne inko becha? How can we retrieve these? Although it means a lot of financial loss for these auction houses, but it's a bigger loss for the country,
right,
for India and India's, as I said, priceless heritage. So there are several steps that can be taken to raise the awareness, to raise pride in our heritage. And heritage is such a big word, it's not just a collection of few letters. It's a whole concept that India is here, India's Asmita identity also lies in its heritage, the past. We live in the present, but we are proud of our past. The past makes us what we are. And if we do not take care of our past, then what will we be left with?
Right.
So I think, again, I say Prime Minister Modi ji's this dhakka unhone jo diya hai, a great push to this entire activity. And he himself is so active in negotiating and seeing that the negotiations are fruitful, they bear fruit, and these things start coming back. I really congratulate our Prime Minister, and I congratulate all the people who are involved in it. But I do look forward to the squad doing even more work, being more forceful, taking more initiatives, concrete steps to go ahead and do what is needful to bring as many things as possible. Another thing is that when they come back, then they have to be displayed. They should be displayed before they are sent back to their original places. And I think that kind of a thing would make people so proud, so happy. Again, जिनको पता नहीं है, खाली सुना है, वो जाके देखें. That is a thing that also we have recommended, I believe.
You're right. Awareness and pride, two important aspects, Mr. Manjul, that the panel recommends. Towards spreading local awareness, the panel suggests, and towards also, most importantly, documentation. This is where the panel has sort of expressed a bit of dissatisfaction as well, saying although ASI is doing a lot of great work, but when it comes to documentation, they're still not up to the mark. So when we see that kind of efforts happening at the level of the Prime Minister in bringing back the artifacts, locally in spreading awareness, in clean and clear documentation, what are the challenges, number one, that the ASI faces? And number two, in terms of coordination with state governments, with other bodies in this area, like INTAC, like the ICCR, like the IGNCA, how can we improve that coordination so that everything is seamless?
Really very, very good initiative. As you have told, there is several agencies or several departments involved in this. First of all, the National Mission for Monuments and Antiquities set up in ASI that responsible for documentation of antiquity and making a national register for antiquity, collating all the data or all the artifacts which is lying in across the country in the position either in the museum or in the private collection or anywhere else. At present, around 16.70 lakhs antiquity has already been documented by National Mission for Monuments and Antiquity under ASI. Yes, it's a meager amount. We have to increase our efforts to collate all those data which is lying with several museums, private museums, organizations, other registered body having a lot of antiquities in
So do we have a dedicated team within the ASI which is looking at documentation and recovery, or is there need to have a separate body which should singularly look at this?
Yes, it already National Mission for Monuments and Antiquities that has the mandate to document all those things. Yes, the strengthening of that particular department or within the ASI is need to be further strengthening and also having the financial support, etc. The basic problem of coordination with the state government and the other private agencies which poses a lot of antiquities, registered antiquities also. So we try to register, one of the provisions in our act is to register the antiquity which is 100-year-old or the manuscript that is 75 years old, having some painting or some information about the science and heritage and traditional knowledge system, etc., has to registered under that provision of registering registered the antiquity. So that also the campaign is going on to register, and we have the dedicated offices in our circle office across the country in every state to register the antiquity, to make the national register finally.
Okay, so there are of course efforts, but certain shortcomings, and financial is something that plays an important role. Dr. Man Singh, that leads me to another question that the panel speaks about, is the need to enhance budget. So you cite the example of several countries like China, the US, Singapore, also Australia. They spend about 2 to 5% of their budget on the promotion of art and culture. Now, a country that basks in the glory of having a very, very significant and a cultural heritage that we are extremely proud of, we of course lag behind in terms of the financial aspect, and that you recommend that should be increased. But can we only rely on the government to increase the budget? Can we not look at the civil society organizations, the NGOs which are working in this area, to also pool in, contribute in terms of spreading awareness that you just spoke about in your previous answer, and also contribute financially to pitch in where there are shortcomings?
Yes, NGOs can spread awareness, but I would say that the CSR, for the corporate social responsibility, sports, health, and education, if heritage can also be added,
right,
that would make a lot of difference, because the PP, the public-private that should come in here. There is a National Culture Fund, but that is for these big monuments like, Humayun's tomb and a few other big monuments. We are now talking of things that are abroad, lying there, or lying in different parts of India, unattended, uncared for, or they are already in the list, as Manjulji mentioned, but then in which kind of condition are they? For all this, a budget is needed, a much bigger budget, as you rightly said, for a culturally rich country like India, which basks in the glory of its heritage, and yet there is so little funding. Therefore, I think the corporates have to play their role, corporates that make India proud in many other ways, but here also it is their responsibility to shake hands with government, pitch in, and bring to fruition this entire effort that is now gaining more momentum. I would rather recommend that this also is possible, a big possibility indeed.
Right, and this reminds me of what the Prime Minister spoke at during the inauguration of the new Parliament building, that India is a country that moves forward, learning from its past and not shrugging off its past behind. So when we have a rich cultural heritage, we have lots to learn from it. We are spending crores every year on preservation and conservation. The efforts are now underway to bring back what belonged to us centuries ago. Locally as well, then there needs to be awareness, there needs to be contribution from multiple stakeholders, and only then we can keep our cultural identity intact. So that having been said, I'll have to wind up the program. Thank you, Dr. Man Singh and Mr. Manjul, for joining me on this edition of Perspective, sharing your thoughts with us and our viewers. And to you viewers, thank you very much for your time as well. I'll see you same time tomorrow now. Take good care of yourselves. Keep watching Sansad TV.